Just to be clear, I am only talking about the tanks. I am not talking about the specific build setups. So things like Riot-Inferno will not have a description, only the Riot tank. I will, however, mention the secondary upgrades that these tanks will most likely use. That is all. Let's begin. Executive. You like strength in numbers. You also like the idea of using them like a normal destroyer. All this because you cannot turn invisible. And you're that kind of player that wants everything. You are greedy and lustful for kills. You have to take with what you can get. You already have a bunch of giant air drones. What more do you want? Sheesh. Trapper. Your persistence is to be admired, but sadly, you are only here to exist for the bigger upgrades. Are you still a mistake? Maybe not, but you don't even do as good as you could before. So here, maybe you are. It all depends on your perspective. Shrapnel. You provide fodder for your team as you would with any other trapper. You provide a safe space for your team from all of the evil players you end up facing. The danger zone is anywhere outside of your trap range. You are depended on and relied on, which puts more pressure on you to survive from the biggest of teams. The secondary upgrades make you a versatile defender. When it's the right upgrade, you live up to your tank name, that's for sure. Marksman. You don't care about score too much, but you care more about finishing off that one Celestial that has 1 hit points left, that most likely have billions of score. Quite rightly so, but everyone hates you for it. You get insulted, roasted, and smashed into oblivion for being one of the most frustrating classes to deal with. They are viable with many secondary upgrades, but let's be real. 99% of players will use the Saw Marksman combo, or the occasional Foundry upgrade. It doesn't matter, your goal is not to farm, but to kill as many tanks as possible, no matter their level. Watch these players in 2 TDM, and 4 TDM specifically. This is where they roam, and they will stop at nothing until you are dead. Overseer. This is not viable. Good riddance. Or is it? Players like to challenge. This is no longer a challenge. Those who used to play Overseer will probably not play the game at all after realizing what happened to it. The same could be said for its other upgraded tanks. Mono. This is technically a tier 2 tank if you count the node as a tier. Or if you're a traditional player, you can call this tier 1 and node tier 0. Big mistake, the node will destroy you because of this. Not that any of this matters, you are a traditional player that remembers the default tank and how good it used to be, which isn't a bad thing. Here, though, it's only for upgrades. No strengths or dominance for you. Pentashot. How do you, of all tanks, become one of the most versatile? How do you, of all tanks, continue to be consistent throughout each game? Hell, there is more versatility within you than before, thanks to these secondary upgrades. You can ram, you can farm even better than before, you can spam bullets, you can tank, you can somehow do it all. The only difference is outside of Saw users, you are not the most problematic tank, for better or worse. Pulsar. The standard Celestial. This is as average as it gets, like Triplet, but in Celestial form. You play on autopilot, trust in the bullets, and whatever secondary upgrade you choose to do the job. You are either quick to defeat or a minor inconvenience for those that approach you. Quad tank. Quad overpowered, quad overpowered, quad overpowered. Wait, wrong game. Annihilator. All of the angry, salty and teaming players that used to main this tank went to the likes of Alpha instead. Why? because you are sadly not the one-shot killing machine that you used to be. This belongs to Alpha now. Traps are absolutely dominant, and it's also very difficult to ambush with one-shot kills. This feels more like a nostalgic tank, if anything. You can still use it, but the glory that was once the Annihilator is not as prominent here. Fusion. This is just another word for hybrid, but this one is not as cool. If it was a good tier 4 tank, then it would be a good rivalry. It is not, however. It's tier 2, so this is pointless. Just like you. Trio. You know the game takes the ultimate piss when there is a secondary upgrade called Triplet. A tank that was somewhat respected and was a default tank for most newcomers gets trolled heavily in a game that focuses far less on bullet spam and more focus on traps and other weird and quirky upgrades by turning it into a secondary upgrade. I feel bad for you, but something tells me that you do not really care. Not to mention that many players expected Triplet originally to be a tier 3 tank from the beginning, not the likes of Split or Triple Shot. Either way, you had this coming from miles away. Quadra. The inevitable upgrade from the likes of Triplet, or Trio in this case, or Gunner. Those who loved the Auto Gunner will use Bombard or Bastion to replicate it, because they cannot live without the Auto Turret on their tank. What a shame, because it's not exactly the same. Generally a tank that goes about its business and ends up being food for more superior tanks. Good for farming Radiance though. Alloy. Real originals remember when this was called the Hybrid. If it was still called Hybrid, this would have arguably have been the most undeserving of downgrades. Luckily for you, you are the scapegoat for the Hybrid, so the roasting and the insulting shall be raised to a minimum for you. You've earned that much. Now be off with you. You are incredibly difficult to beat and you are not even the highest tier. You also regret picking this early as you cannot farm well otherwise. You have 3 options. 1. You die in a TDM base and respawn. 2. You wait it out until level 90. Or number 3. Provide backup for your celestial teammates. There is no other option. Choose wisely before picking this too early. Flare. You focus more on your name being shortened than anything else. That's all there is to you. You are the real flank guard in your eyes, but without the same name. Naming this only as flank makes more sense, as you can stop players approaching from behind. But only in theory. Guard. You focus more on the traps than the bullets. That's all there is to you. You are the real flank guard in your eyes, but without the same name. Naming this guard at least makes more sense, as you can protect yourself from behind, so you are smarter and more logical than you think. But only in theory. Wake! This is a discount bomber if I've ever seen one. Wake up! Do not claim you are as good as the bomber. You're tier 3. Get over yourself. Traps are the only good thing about you. Your bullets are terrible. Are you trying to challenge yourself? Use a better tank for that. You are nothing like the booster. Conglomerate. This is a discount fighter if I've ever seen one. Now this is a lower tier tank, so you can slightly be forgiven. But if you're trying to act like a fighter or a surfer, your hopes and dreams will be obliterated into dust. Sorry, but that's just the truth. Minigun. This feels like one of the most useless bullet tanks out there, even though it is one of the few, if not only, previous tanks that ended up as a higher upgraded tier. You may surprise a few players, But once they find out your tricks, you're easy to dispatch. You're left in the shadows, never to be seen again. Commander! You're a shell of your former self. No one pays attention to you no more. That is, if they paid attention to you in the first place. Even Director had better treatment. You've been thrown in the trash. Soon you'll find your way back. But it's not here. Keep searching. Compound! You are more like the hybrid than the hybrid itself. Nothing else to say here. Rubber! Quad tank, but only with traps. That's all you are. You're not interesting enough for a real player description. Carry on. Quasar! If Celestials have one thing in common, it's the sudden ambush. Whether it is with the Comet or Meteor, for example, they will use this to their advantage, putting everyone on guard by being more vigilant when a Celestial is around. Quasar is one of these Celestials. It's like they only have one trick up their sleeve. This is not good enough for a team of dozens of players, sadly. Spread. Do we really have to talk about this? You stole Spreadshot's name and act more like the original Triple Shot. Get out of here, you rogue thief. This place is not for you. Barricade! Why did you lose one trap barrel? The same reason for the other tanks that got downgraded, but that doesn't stop you from trying to spam as many traps as possible in the shortest amount of time. There is no way you think this tank is truly viable no more. You just like using it with Inferno and pretend like it's the more overpowered tank, when there's simply another tank better than you. Sniper! It is common knowledge and a mutual agreement that everyone hates snipers except those that main them, regardless of the game they are featured in. However, this isn't so bad. You as a sniper have been downgraded like most of the previous lower tier tanks. It doesn't matter, because we all know the one tank that makes everything worse, and you are the stepping stone for it. In other words, you are still a nuisance. The Sniper of Synexio. This is arguably the most annoying tier 2 tank in the game. You will ambush players as well as take advantage of your faster reload in order to escape from other players. These players are there simply to frustrate you and nothing else, or they're trying to obtain billions of score as an achievement. Either way, these players will frustrate you to no end, and they revel in your anger. This is the perfect example of do not feed the troll. You are just here to exist, but you also cry that there's no auto gunner upgrade. Don't worry though, you can use Bombard or Bastion with any tank, not just you. Is it not so wonderful that every tank can be considered an auto tank now? You must be thrilled, but nobody still likes you.
Good. Let the hate flow through you.
Director. You brag about arguably being the best tier 2 tank and the fact that it's somewhat still viable in a game that is heavily skewed towards better upgrades and tanks with different mechanics, which is for good reason. The only rival you have is Gamma, and that single trap is enough to shut you up. Keep your Director drones to yourself. Moon! If you were as ubiquitous as the Overlord, this would be a huge pain to deal with. Sadly for you, other Celestials have taken that spot. Think Blizzard or Charon. They're forever present in the likes of the Crossroads or Free-for-All. You need an intervention to catch up to the likes of these two Celestials, because you are currently falling behind. Streamline. You went from being one of the most reasonable tank choices to being one of the saltiest. Tired of dying with a different tank? So Streamliner is the build and tank that you become. The RAM annihilator of the game. Obnoxious, petty, and outright insane. If you don't play RAM, you will most likely die to the same tank but as a RAM build. You cannot win. Whose idea was it to have this tank focus more on RAM than bullet? It makes no sense. Quite like you. Octotank. How does one explain Octotank? Let's be real, this version acts like a real hurricane. You soar and you surprise players with your RAM build, but of course, that's not the true way to play this. It's just all in good fun. You troll more instead of playing seriously, and for some reason, you wouldn't have it any other way. No. This looks awfully familiar. This is exactly like the Ball, the greatest tank in the game. Now there are secondary upgrades that make your opponents tremble in fear. Respect through fear. This is you in a nutshell. Some even kill you because of it. Don't worry though, you will punish them to the fullest extent of the balls. Or node in this case. Single. You go through an identity crisis frequently. You don't know who or what you want to be. That's why you are a destroyer here instead of an upgraded default tank. It's better for you if you never get noticed, so you can find your way out of this. Stockade! The Tri-Trapper feels a lot different here. You still don't take the game too serious, but you are able to hold your own in team mode, and even in some free-for-all servers. There is nothing too special about you here, but you prefer it that way. Engineer! You are upset at the fact that you cannot control where your trap goes exactly. The mechanic is not here. No one is upset at the fact that you have been downgraded, and now the likes of Raider and Arsenal have replaced you as the most annoying trapper tank. One of the two. Live in the face of obscurity and your life will be better off. Industry. You like the idea of a twinception. A bunch of mini twin tanks overhauling your enemy. Generally inferior to manufacturer, but still works as a team with them regardless. This is the main way that bullet spamming would be innovated, rather than sticking to the traditional formula. Satellite. Drones as a celestial sounds terrifying on paper. For Satellite, however, that terror is easily misplaced. Although it's not the top tier, it's underwhelming. Perhaps that's due to the nerfs to them, but as of right now, it is not looking good for this celestial class. Hybrid. What makes Hybrid so great here? You can finally control your drones, the thing you have always wanted since the beginning. Add that to the strong bullet and it's finally the more superior to Annihilator. That argument can be put to rest here. There is a lot to like about this version of Hybrid. Strong bullets and strong drones. What is not to love? The problem, however, although it's not as problematic for Hybrid, is the lack of firepower in the main bullet. This is fine though, because it was never 100% intended to be this way. It's finally the tank that it's supposed to be. Too bad it's in Senexio, and not previous incarnations. But for good reason. Because it would be almost unstoppable. Overpowered tanks would have ruined the mystique that is the Hybrid. 0800 must be happy about this. And to think, this version originally didn't exist and was called Alloy instead. You just dodged a bullet. A sniper bullet. Arsenal. You revel in the fact that you can shoot 2 engineer traps at once. You are that one tank that controls the tighter areas of the crossroads or provides protection from ram builds. Players have to approach you with caution. because they know your persistence of being an absolute jerk knows no bounds. Overlord! Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Oh, how the torrents have tabled. Oh, how the silence is deafening. It is safe to say that nobody, other than the biggest overlord mains, are sad to see you downgraded and degraded into an absolute travesty. The sheer amount of pain you have caused everyone, it is now traversed back onto you in the swiftest of fashion. Nothing is more satisfying than this. Oh, but I'm not done. Because this is no longer Overlord, this is now overdone, because you're done. Finished, thrown into the wasteland of hell, where all of the souls you have killed remain. They will not give you a warm welcome. This was always going to come to you, and you deserve it all of it. No more will you cause destruction and frustration across the entire server. Everything that has come to you is well deserved. Nobody will mourn the loss of the one so-called Great Overlord. But hey, at least you exist. Necromancer doesn't even appear here, but you can also argue that it would be better off if Necromancer never appeared. What is the purpose of appearing in another game if you are a complete downgrade from the original? Keep your infamous legacy intact without diluting it any further. That's what the Necromancer has done, because they know when to quit. You never know when to stop. This is why you tried coming here to release your bloodthirsty power across the entire game. Not this time. It was about time this happened to you. Condemned to hell, you are. The Shadow Realm is where you belong. I hear the Abyss is accessible these days. Maybe you should try entering that black hole if you want to sustain your former glory back. But the damage has been done. It's over. You are finished. You have been given the Auto Smasher roasting that you have deserved since the beginning. And no one will ever see you the same again. Goodbye, Overlord. Nobody will ever miss you. By the way, Auto Smasher was considered a joke tank. And look at you now. Take that as you will. Disperse! Formerly Spreadshot, why does this have extra vision? Nobody knows. It's one of the few random upgrades. Bullet spamming with this is even worse, a genuine moving wall with no bullet speed. You provide bullet fodder whilst everyone attacks. This is arguably the best farmer and best bullet spam tank, even over Pentashot, and that's saying something. And you wear that badge proudly because this is a game where this tank finally shines. I say finally, it always did. But in different areas and not so much in others. The ego is inflated heavily. The only thing you were most known for, which was how better you are than a triplet, is null and void here, even with your name change, which makes you even more null and void. Now you have become even more irrelevant than you ever were. How does it feel to start by being one of the loudest tanks in the room to this? It's real tragic, but that's what you keep telling yourself. The closest thing to the original mothership there will ever be, the original Sinope was untouchable like an overlord on steroids, which is essentially what this is. Nowadays, players prefer other Celestials because they are simply much easier to use. As of right now, your glory days are over. Destroyer. Thanks to traps being more dominant and overpowered here, you are not so much of a destroyer. Bullets aren't even as strong as they once were. The only thing destroyed is your ego. Same with Annihilator. I'd say this was a long time coming, but it's at the cost of what you do best. What's the point of a destroyer branch if you cannot easily one-shot kill players? Your anger may be warranted, but your ego is still shattered. Now you cannot back it up. Too bad. It's a shame nobody cares. Mechanic. For some reason, you pick a fight with the Hatcher tank for no reason other than to be an asshole. Why? For simply being almost exactly the same as you, the only difference being you shoot traps and Hatcher deploys drones. All you are is a tri-trapper that has standard bullets on it. It's no big deal. Grow up and stop being so immature. You make the twin triplet feud look reasonable in comparison, especially since Hatchers don't care about you whatsoever. Stick to your gun, or traps, and maybe you will be more liked than everyone else. Imagine being 5/8 of an octatank, chopping parts of it off for no reason. It's not a slice of cheese, you know. This sounds more like a filler upgrade, more so than every other filler upgrade from Assassin to Compound. It exists on the premise of existing and nothing else. The only good thing is that this is the real upgrade to Horizon. Perhaps this should have been an upgrade in previous games. I guess it's that one tank that was forgotten in memory. Oh well. Assassin. You are still as useless as you ever were. One click and you're now a ranger, or in this case, marksman. You may be a sniper, but you have never elevated the class since existing. No secondary upgrades will save you. You can ram with saw with like any other tank. That doesn't make you any good. Stop it. Get some help. Now. Please. For your own sake. Challenge. The perfect encapsulation of chaotic neutral. You only help your celestial teammates when it's convenient for you, but you also love to play solo and abandon your team whenever the time is right, a lot of the time causing your other teammates to die in the process. You often try to take charge as a leader, but that falls flat if you have teammates that do not listen. That's why you prefer to be solo, so you can only rely on yourself, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but will take advantage whenever you see an opportunity. In hindsight, you cannot always be trusted. You're only in it for yourself. Split. Triple Shot is not going to like this, and quite frankly, does anyone even pick this upgrade? The only reason why someone would is because it is good at farming shapes with bullets itself, but players will use the saw branch by default. Imagine being more useless than a secondary upgrade. A split personality is what you have, but only in game. Hopefully not in person. Beta. Basically the same as Gamma, but with stronger traps and slower reload. Yes, this isn't the most interesting description of the stupid tank. Deal with it. Manufacturer. Borderline overpowered when done properly. You cannot imagine how difficult dealing with this tank is when paired with Mothership. Ram being its weakness, you're hard to approach otherwise. What do we expect from drone tanks? You could argue this is the new Overlord or Factory, but considering both tanks have been downgraded in this game, that is an insult. Overall, do not mess with this tank without good preparation. Scrap! You only play this because you want to play the Hexatrapper with Bombard. That's as close as you get to being Hexatrapper. This is the only reason you are not scrapped, because you give people the chance to play something that literally doesn't exist. Asteroid. You have always been the go-to tank for protection, and you always thrive in it. You let it get to your head and think you can take the more offensive tanks head first. This backfires. Your problem is yourself when you rely too much on your own traps when running at a snail's pace. You can only hope that you can kill by the means of a lucky player entering your Inferno sphere, or some player unwillingly running into your traps. Most players do not like you, but only when they have to face you. Be prepared to see asteroid players in packs, or left behind due to the fact that they are so terribly slow. Even your fellow Celestial teammates sometimes forget about you. But that's the only kind of sympathy you'll ever receive. Factory. This factory may not deserve the same roasting as Overlord has. Why? Because Factory and its counterparts actually previously required skill. Overlord is as no-brain as it gets, outside of Pentashot. However, that does not take away the same fact that it may have gotten what's coming. You adapt, however, and you are fine with using industry or manufacturer to potentially flex your skill even more, even though with inconsistent results. Manager. You seem to be fine taking the back seat for other tanks to shine, but this most likely stems from the fact that you can no longer be invisible. So in hindsight, you probably did the right thing. Good for you. I guess that's why you're not an Overlord. Blockade! The true flank guard. Right? You like messing around with this when you're at a higher level and maybe kill unsuspecting players who believe you're an easy target. Those kind of troll players still exist in typical fashion, and you like taking advantage of it. Alpha. There is nothing alpha about you, the Annihilator of Synexio, mainly due to the fact that outside of RAM builds, this is the go-to tank for angry players who died to the same thing, acting like 9 years old with their temper tantrums in full display. Not all players are like this, but what cannot be denied is this has replaced the Annihilator as one of the saltiest tanks to ever exist. One day you will realise all of this anger is not worth it, but that's a long way off. Is your hair receding yet? You might want to check up on that before you lose all of it. Chill out. Wait. The fact that you have bullets that match Sniper's bullet speed is ridiculous. You're supposed to be the new booster, not a sniper. Are you a booster sniper? Who knows, but you're innovative in the fact that you're still one of the most annoying tanks that can be encountered. You can use almost every build and setup imaginable, from ram to tank to bullet. You can do it all. There is more use for you than expected, and because of this, you do not worry too much about the build you use. If you're good enough, and half of the time you are not, you can keep up with the top tier tanks in the game for this very reason. You're one of the lucky ones, thanks to your double trap barrels. Just admit it. Just admit the fact that the double trap barrels are the only reason that you are perfectly viable. Do not deny it. The first stage is denial. There are 4 stages of grief to go through. Come on, you can do it. Haha. If you hatch any more mini drones, you will explode. If you die to a sniper or a ram user one more time, nothing will happen because you stick to your guns no matter how bad you are. There are more strength in numbers for you, and this is what you rely on. You also rely on players being terrible, same with the other drone tanks. How far will that take you? Almost, if not absolutely nowhere. Blizzard! Why have 1 giant bullet when you can have 3? That's great for you. It does not mean that your ambushing skills are any better, especially if you go against traps. You're a good example of having too much of a good thing. Don't forget that you are an easy target for non-Celestials when in groups. You better find your fellow Celestials before you get swarmed. Palisade! You are one of the most overlooked tanks out there. This isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, but whenever you appear in any team mode, you octo-tank the middle and try to control the entire server. The paradigm often shifts when you are here, blasting your traps and making a near indestructible fortress that the fortress tank would be jealous of. This would be nothing special if it weren't for the secondary upgrades. Bombard and Inferno are the most used, but it can use any of them with ease. Its main issue is if it gets stuck in the likes of the Crossroads and the fact that it's one of the worst farming tanks out there. In the world of addiction that is high score, Palisade doesn't get picked often, hence why it's overlooked. Maybe it's a good thing. Every tank has to have flaws somewhere. Raider! Despite all of the nerfs to this tank, you still remain a huge threat thanks to your sniper-like bullets that reach further than expected. You control every team mode there is because you want it easy. You take pride in the fact that you're an insufferable tank to deal with and you take no prisoners. Probably isn't liked at all wherever they appear. Emperor! The new Overlord, but with a lot more drones. Your name is fitting for a tank class such as this. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for your gameplay. Amazing to pick off players with a lack of defense, terrible against those who have enough health and damage to destroy you. You are a double-edged sword, and we both know how those turn out. Your quest for the most dominant tank is a rough one, but you will do whatever you can otherwise. Nobody will like you no matter what, thanks to the most infamous tank, that is, the Overlord. Amalgam! Before you, Riot was the most dominant tank for Crossroads, and I guess now the Abyss. Now, it's you. Commonly using the Inferno secondary upgrade, it's essentially a battle of who has the most of them, and who is the highest level. The only tank that uses traps, drones and bullets, and can pull it off very well. This is what makes you such a threat. Never can you explain Amalgam in 2 words. Dominance and balance. That's the perfect way to describe you. Most players who are not equipped to deal with you just run away, or ambush you in the most hilarious and embarrassing ways. The best of Amalgams need multiple players to simply destroy just one of them, thanks to the game's sheer imbalance of tanks. In Diepio, you would either ask yourself, how many pentashots, or how many overlords? Here it's, how many amalgams? That's your status, but mainly in the Crossroads. You have replaced both tanks in that field. I don't need to explain any more of this to you. Horizon! The idea of a 180-degree tank was always good in theory but never came to fruition. Spreadshot was the closest it got, and look how that turned out. A dominant beast. Horizon though? The same sadly cannot be said, but it has its uses. This is one of those tanks you play when you're bored as hell and feel like messing around, taking nothing too seriously. That's just how it is. Riot! You are infamous for bringing to light how overpowered traps were. You relished in the fact that you could solo multiple Celestials at once without breaking a sweat, and the only reason you died was because you screwed up. You are definitely one of the most arrogant and egotistical players to ever be witnessed, thanks to all of this. Now that Amalgam generally outshines you these days, all of the better players play that tank instead of you. The only ones that still play you in the same vein as before are the most stubborn of players that are convinced these traps are the best thing to be added since the Auto Smasher. And we all know what happened to that tank. Oh snap! Nova! If Node and Nova had a true 1v1 duel, nothing would last. The cataclysmic devastation that would follow would make the Abyss look like a tiny crack in comparison. It's a good thing both of these are the base tiers. Otherwise, everything that you know and love would cease to exist. Chaos has been contained and nobody even realizes it. You're welcome. And that's all really? I messed up the outro? And that's all of the main tank descriptions, including the Celestials. And yes, I continue to roast a lot of them, and if you have a problem with that, you are probably the Overlord. Anyway, that is all. Feel free to tell your descriptions of any tank. Peace.